Sutta Nipāta, Book 5, Pārāyana Vagga. Sutta number 5.1, Vatthugāthā Sutta. The beginning verses. A Brahmin from a lovely city of the Kosalan region, a master of the Vedic mantras, desiring to reach the highest, left all things behind in search of attaining nothingness, as he came down to the south. Thus it was during the reign of Alaka that he found his way to the township of Asaka. There he settled along the bank of the river Godavari, sustaining himself on the fruits and fresh leaves he could obtain from trees. Being a Brahmin, he found support from the large village that was close to where he stayed. With the donations received from the public, he performed a great ritual sacrifice. After completing the great sacrifice, on his return back to his dwelling, he saw another Brahmin approaching and entering his hermitage. Looking exhausted, thirsty, with swollen and sore feet, unbrushed teeth and dust covering his hair, the man stood there, asking for 500 coins from him. Bhavari, on seeing the man in such a state, invited him to sit down as he prepared a seat for him, meanwhile inquiring about the stranger's well-being and health by saying, "Whatever I had and that I could have offered you, all that is now fully spent. Forgive me, my dear Brahmin, I no longer have the 500 coins you seek. If this offering is not made in time, by giving me what I ask of you," the Brahmin threatened as he continued, "then, on the 7th day from now, your head will crack and split open into 7 pieces. Speaking in this manner, the charlatan put on a show as he performed some rituals and chanted some mantras meant to frighten and cause distress in the heart of his listener. Thus, Bhavari the Brahmin became worried. Then, being suddenly struck by the arrow of grief, Bhavari lost his appetite and refused to take food, so much so that he became severely emaciated. But even worse, as he was getting agitated and worried, his heart could not settle into meditation. It was then that a deva, on seeing him frightened and in disarray, took pity on him and decided to approach Bhavari and addressed him in verse. That cunning and deceitful man, desiring to profit from others, is simply doing one of his tricks again. He is the last person to know anything about what is in a person's head, let alone in cracking them open or splitting them. He is simply trying to extort money from you. O kind and generous being, if you could please do tell me more on what is in a person's head and on cracking them open and splitting them. Well, I too do not know much about what is in a person's head, nor about cracking them open and splitting them. But I do know this. When it comes to knowing what is in a person's head, and on cracking them open and splitting them, that insight with which one might have the vision to truly see belongs only to the conquerors. In that case, O kind Deva, please tell me, who in this vast world might have that vision? A true conqueror, who could tell me what I need to know about what is in a person's head, and on cracking them open and splitting them. There is indeed one such conqueror living in this vast world today, the brilliant son of the Sakyan warriors, a descendant of the lineage of King Okkaka. Being the world leader from the kingdom of Kapilavatthu, he has recently gone forth, a true beacon for the world. He is indeed Brahmin, the fully self-awakened Buddha, having overcome with his supreme wisdom and gone across to the farthest shore, beyond all the things offered by the world, for he certainly is the one who, by attaining to the highest knowledges and powers, sees with clear vision all that is hidden. He is the one truly released, having liberated himself with the destruction of all acquisitions and assets. He is the Buddha himself, the truly blessed one in the world, the one with pure vision who now teaches the Dhamma that is beautiful to a multitude of beings. You must go and approach him and ask your question. He is the only one who can answer and explain it to you. In hearing the words, fully self-awakened Buddha, Bhavari became exceedingly happy, and his grief completely and suddenly disappeared, and instead, his heart was now overflooding with joy. Then, Bhavari, the overjoyed Brahmin, being elated and especially pleased, asked that Deva, "Where, in which state, village, or town is this protector of the world currently? Where might we find him as we go to pay homage at the feet of the fully self-awakened one, this giant among all men?" The hero among men, the possessor of vast wisdom and understanding, is currently living in the Kosalan country, in the city of Savatthi. That hungerless and relentless son of the Sakyans dwells appeased, having fully released himself from the asavas that contaminate the hearts of beings everywhere. He, the chief among men, will explain to you what you need to know about what is in a person's head, and on cracking them open and splitting them. Then the Brahmin Bhavari called to him all those who had taken him as their teacher, Brahmin pupils of his, who had mastered the Vedic mantras, and announced to them, "Come, my young pupils, pay close attention to my words. That which is so incredibly rare has now finally taken place. The fully self-awakened one has now arisen and is living among us in our world. Quickly now, with this event being exceptionally unique, I now instruct you to go to the city of Savatthi and see the noblest of all two-footed beings." "But Brahmin, how are we to recognize and know him to be truly the Buddha when we do get to see him? Kindly tell us how, teacher, because we do not know, so that we may indeed recognize him." Fortunately, we have been handed down our ancient Vedic mantras, which tell us about the signs and marks with which we are to recognize him. These are the marks of the great man, the 32 marks that are listed for us in order. He who bears these marks on his body can have only two possible alternatives in the direction and choice of living his life, and not a third. If he were to lead a household life, he inevitably would become a true world-conquering, wheel-turning universal monarch, a Chakravartin. Living according to the Dhamma himself, he would rule without the use of swords or weapons, but only through the true Dhamma, as he brings harmonious order into the world. But if he were to go forth by leaving the household life and thus become homeless, he would then become a fully self-awakened Buddha, the supreme Arahant who sets the wheel of Dhamma in motion. He would finally dispel the darkness by removing the shroud of ignorance from the world. Now, here is my instruction to you, so pay close attention. First, approach him respectfully and with only your mind. Ask him about my birth, clan, and about the marks I bear on my body. Then, ask him about the mantras I know, and the number of my students, and finally, ask him about what's in a person's head, and on cracking them open and splitting them. If he is indeed the Buddha, then all things are revealed to him. Therefore, he sees without any obstructions. Thus, although your questions would remain unspoken, he would reveal to you their answers, as he explains them to you verbally. Then, having been instructed thus by their teacher, the 16 Brahmin pupils of Bhavari, including Ajita, Tissametteyya, Puṇṇaka, Mettagū, Dhotaka, Upasīva, Nanda, Hemaka, along with Todeyya and Kappa, and Jatukaṇṇi the wise, Badrāvudha, Udaya, Posala, the wise Mogharaja, as well as the great sage Pingya. Each of these students, along with their own following in groups, who were already renowned and well known as dedicated meditators, proficient with the jhana practices, as well as able to know and see their past lives, they all paid homage to their teacher Bhavari, and after circumambulating him with their matted hair and antelope hide over their shoulders, together they all went in the direction of the north. Thus, they went first from Patithana in the region of Alaka to Mahisati, then Ujjaini, afterwards to Gonadha, Vedisa, which is sometimes called Vanasa. Going further, they reached Kosambi, Saketa, and then came upon the noble and fairest city of all, Savatthi. Continuing on, they got to Setavya, Kapilavatthu, and Kusinara. Traveling on further, they went to Pava, Bhoganagara, then to Vesali and Magadha, until they finally reached the lovely Pasanaka shrine. And as they grew near, their steps quickened even more, just like that thirsty and parched man who hears the sound of flowing, cool and refreshing water, or like a merchant who is about to make the deal of a lifetime, having found guaranteed success and gain, and like those left out under the sun for a long time, burned by the heat, eagerly hastening towards a large shady tree. Thus, those Brahmins all rushed quickly and climbed up the mountain. And it so happened that right at that moment, the Blessed One, seated in front of the Sangha of bhikkhus, was teaching the Dhamma to them, like a lion roaring in the jungle. Just then, Ajita saw the Blessed One, glistening like the sun, serenely radiating his light towards everyone, much like the full moon does on the 15th day of the month. Quietly he watched, as he carefully investigated and saw all the observable marks on his body, while he stood to one side with a joyful heart, and then he began mentally asking the questions he received from his teacher, addressing them to the Blessed One. Sir, kindly tell us about our teacher, his age, the clan he comes from, and the marks of a great man which he bears. Do speak to us about his level of learning in the Vedas, and how many Brahmins he teaches. And the Blessed One, turning to Ajita, began to speak by saying, The age of your teacher is 120 years, and Bhavari is the clan to which he belongs. He has on his body 3 of the marks of a great man, and he has completely mastered the 3 Vedas. He has full understanding of how to identify the marks, and is knowledgeable of the oral tradition, along with their grammar, history, and the roots and meanings of words, as well as their rituals. He has under him 500 Brahmins who call him their teacher. O chief among men, destroyer of craving, please kindly also tell us in detail about the marks on our noble Bhavari's body, so that all our doubts and uncertainties may once and for all vanish and fade away. Now, Brahmin, know this. Your teacher can cover his face with the tongue if he wants to. He has a clump of hair grown between the eyebrows, and his genitals are encased, being covered within the body as though in a pouch. Meanwhile, others who were present, in hearing these replies from the Blessed One to the unspoken questions, sat there in reverence with their hands in Anjali, completely in awe, as a result of what they just witnessed, and they began to reflect. Who is it that is asking these questions from the Blessed One? Could it have been Brahma himself, or Indra, or Sujampati, posing these questions silently through their mind, to which the Blessed One gave his replies? It was then that Ajita asked a further question. Bhavari would like to know what is in a person's head, and on cracking them open and splitting them. May the Blessed One please help us by explaining the answer to these, so that our confusion may be dispelled. You must know and understand that ignorance itself is what's in the head, whereas knowledge and understanding are what crack open and split the head. But this must be supported by the faith you possess in your heart, along with mindfulness, collectedness of mind, fervent desire for practice, and persevering effort. Then, in hearing all his questions being fully answered, the young man, now thoroughly moved and delighted, and with utter confidence in his heart, arranged his antelope hide robe on one shoulder, and bowed down by placing his head at the feet of the Blessed One, while respectfully addressing him. O good Gautama, the Brahmin Bhavari and all his pupils are now utterly delighted and exceedingly happy, with gladdened hearts, as we all together bow and pay homage to the Blessed One by placing our head at your feet, the one with perfect vision. May Bhavari, together with all his pupils, including yourself, be gladdened with appeased minds. May you all live long and happily. And now that Bhavari's questions have been answered, if you feel you have any questions to ask yourselves, now is the time for you all to ask whatever queries you may have, so you may receive their explanations. Then, having been granted the permission and precious opportunity by the fully self-awakened one to ask questions, they all sat to one side with their hands in worshipful Anjali, as Ajita began asking the first question. Sutta Nipāta 5.2 Ajitamāṇavapucchā Sutta. Questions of the Brahmin Ajita. By what is the world veiled? Asked the Brahmin Ajita as he continued. Why do things lose their luster and become dull? Please explain to me what makes the world as sticky as a bog, trapping beings within it. Kindly tell me, what is the great fear of the world? And the Blessed One said, the world is veiled by ignorance. Because of covetousness and negligence, the world loses its luster and becomes dull. Ceaselessly wanting the other makes the world as sticky as a bog, trapping beings within it. And experiencing suffering is the great fear of the world. Then the Brahmin Ajita said, everywhere things are in motion, with streams that constantly flow. What is it that can stop their flow? Please explain to me how to restrain their movements. In what way can one stop them in their tracks? And the Blessed One replied, all the streams produced by the world should be kept in check through the application of mindfulness. I declare that the way to restrain their movements and stop them in their tracks is none other than the application of wisdom. Then the Brahmin Ajita said, good sir, wisdom, mindfulness, and what we call Namarupa, how can one reach the culmination of these? Do these ever come to cease? The Blessed One then said, Ajita, this question you asked I will now provide an answer for, as to how Namarupa can reach its culmination and cease. With the ceasing of consciousness, Namarupa also comes to cease. Then the Brahmin Ajita said, good sir, I see many here who, having carefully scrutinized, are now living and training in this good Dhamma. Could you please instruct me as to what you consider to be wise behavior? How do your disciples train in the holy life? And the Blessed One replied, they train by no longer looking for sensual gratification, remaining unperturbed, calm and collected, cautiously protecting the mind from getting sullied, skillful and wholesome as he interacts with all manner of things. In this way, the bhikkhu lives the holy life mindfully. Sutta Nipāta 5.3 Tissametteyya Māṇavapucchā Sutta. Questions of the Brahmin Tissametteyya. In this world, whom do you consider as being truly contented? The one with no agitation left in the heart, asked the Brahmin Tissametteyya from the Blessed One, as he continued. Who is that one who, having understood both ends, does not get caught in the middle? Whom do you declare to be the great man? Who is it that has escaped the seamstress in the world? And the Blessed One said, Mettagū, amidst a world that is lost in sensuality and lust, he genuinely leads the holy life, with his heart rid of craving. He remains ever mindful. It is that bhikkhu who, having carefully scrutinized, now stands truly quenched, and therefore has no more agitation left in him. He who, having understood both ends, does not get caught in the middle, through his wisdom. It is he whom I declare to be the great man, for he has succeeded in bypassing the seamstress in the world. Sutta Nipāta 5.4 Puṇṇakamāṇavapucchā Sutta. Questions of the Brahmin Puṇṇaka. O unshakable teacher, who clearly sees the root of all things, there is a question I have come to ask, said the Brahmin Puṇṇaka as he continued. Why have the sages, human beings, warrior kings and Brahmins in the world been making sacrifices to the gods all this time and continue to do so? I kindly ask you on this matter. May the Blessed One please tell me the answer to this. And the Blessed One replied, all those sages, human beings, warrior kings and Brahmins in the world have been making sacrifices to the gods and continue to do so for the simple reason that they all must face sickness and old age. Yet, they hope to somehow reappear into a better state after death, Puṇṇaka. Bhante, has anyone among those sages, human beings, warrior kings, and Brahmins in the world, continued the Brahmin Puṇṇaka, while being so meticulous and dedicated in the rituals of making those offerings and sacrifices to the gods, been able to break free by crossing over and completely overcoming the cycles of rebirth and death? I kindly ask the Blessed One to please give me the answer to this. And the Blessed One continued in his reply. Whether by wishing, praying, beseeching, begging, extolling, or praising, they have all been offering and making sacrifices for the simple reason for gaining more opportunities so to enjoy sensual pleasures. Thus I declare that despite all the offerings and sacrifices they make, because they are driven by passion, none of those people have been able to break free or cross over and completely overcome the cycles of rebirth and death. And the Brahmin Puṇṇaka asked further, in that case, Bhante, seeing that none among those people were able to overcome the cycles of rebirth and death by the making of offerings and sacrifices to the gods, then who are the ones, Blessed Lord, who did in fact break free by crossing over, and thus completely overcoming the cycles of rebirth and death? Please, may the Blessed One tell me the answer to this. And the Blessed One said, seeing the world's vicissitudes, tranquil beyond its highs and lows, he stands unperturbed by its troubles, unperplexed and desireless. And with no hidden embers of passions or hopes left in him, it is he whom I declare, the one who remains untouched. For he indeed has broken free and fully crossed over birth and death. Sutta Nipāta 5.5 Mettagūmāṇavapucchā Sutta. Questions of the Brahmin Mettagū. Then the Brahmin Mettagū said, please tell me this, O Blessed One, for I believe you, having attained to the highest wisdom, are the one who can truly provide an answer to my question. All the various forms of suffering that exist in the world, where do they all originate? And the Blessed One replied, I will answer your question, Mettagū, from direct seeing, and as someone who knows by having experienced it myself. For your asking about the origination of suffering of me is truly the right kind of question to be asked. Suffering, at its very core, originates, Mettagū, and manifests into its various forms that it does because of having assets or acquisitions, which one accumulates throughout life. Indeed, the foolish and dense person who keeps making and accruing assets without realizing their impact continues to experience suffering again and again. But the wise ones who know better do not continue making or accruing any more assets, seeing it as the very cause for rebirth and perpetual existences in the future, and for experiencing unending series of misery. Then the Brahmin Mettagū said, O great sage, I find my question and all our questions here fully answered, but I must ask you one more, please. How do the wise ones go beyond? By fully crossing over this flood of rebirth, aging, pain, anguish, and lament. Kindly, do explain this to me clearly, for you know this firsthand, having experienced it directly yourself. And the Blessed One said, Mettagū, I will explain to you a teaching which is not something that has come down through oral tradition or hearsay, as the product of conditionality. I will instruct you on the Dhamma which is attainable and accessible right here, right now, directly and in this very birth. It is those wise ones who, by living mindfully, come to directly know the Dhamma, and thus go beyond and fully cross over the flood of constantly attaching, seizing, and grabbing in the world. The Brahmin Mettagū then said, I am filled with such joy and delight, being instructed by the great sage on this noble Dhamma, through the application and understanding of which the mindfully living practitioner would cut oneself free from and overcome all attachments to the world. And the Blessed One replied by saying, Mettagū, whether above, below, around, or across, and everywhere in between, whatever you have come to know and experience, give up any tendencies you may have to savor or relish any of it. By releasing yourself from dwelling on them, you will also eradicate the very consciousness which keeps dragging you through constant births and rebecomings. By living in this way, the bhikkhu remains constantly mindful, while diligently working on his mind, neither cherishing nor allowing himself to get lost in the details of whatever he experiences from moment to moment. Through the understanding he gains from giving up likes and dislikes, and his attachment to them, right here and in this very birth, he also gives up the suffering brought on by birth, aging, pain, anguish, and lament. Then the Brahmin Mettagū said, I delight in listening to the words uttered by the great sage. O Gautama, you truly have given up all assets and acquisitions that lead to rebecoming. Surely the Blessed One knows the truth of this Dhamma directly, for he has released himself from all suffering and sorrow. And certainly those whom you instruct, O Wise One, clarifying the Dhamma for them, also become released from suffering and pain. And now that I have come here and listened to you, I bow at your feet, O mighty Naga, as I seek to learn from you non-stop, so that I too may be released from the misery and sorrow of rebecoming. The Blessed One then said, Any true Brahmin who is recognized as being wise, having gained the understanding of the higher knowledges, and who lives detached from sensuality, not desiring further rebirth into any state of becoming, can indeed be declared to have crossed the flood. Having gone beyond to the farther shore, he lives the rest of his days with the cool softness in his heart, lacking rigidity and conceit, with a presence that is so alive and fresh, while remaining considerate and kind. And any man found here among us who, being wise, has gained the understanding of the higher knowledges and lives free from craving, having unshackled himself from future existences, unconfused and released from misery, and therefore without any longing or expectations left in his heart, it is such a person whom I indeed declare to be the one who has definitely crossed the flood and gone beyond rebirth and aging. Sutta Nipāta 5.6 Dhotakamāṇavapucchā Sutta. Questions of the Brahmin Dhotaka. Then the Brahmin Dhotaka said, O Blessed One, I would like to ask you a question, please. I long to hear your words of instruction, O great sage. Once having received your guidance, I wish to dedicate myself fully, training as I do to reach the state of internal quiet, appeasement, Nibbana. And the Blessed One said, Then, Dhotaka, exert yourself without holding back, always being on your toes with full alertness, driven with zeal and mindful, starting from right this very minute. And as you hear my words of instruction even now, then begin training as we speak, dedicating yourself fully to the training, to reach the state of internal quiet appeasement, Nibbana. Then the Brahmin Dhotaka said, Among this existence of gods and men, I see the Brahmin who walks alone, with nothing to hold on to. For this, O Omniscient One, I humbly and worshipfully bow at your feet. Please release me, O Sakyan, from my perplexing doubts. And the Blessed One replied, Dhotaka, I am not able to release anyone in the world who has perplexing doubts plaguing one's heart. But when you understand by learning this noble Dhamma and apply it yourself, then you will release yourself and cross over the great flood. And the Brahmin Dhotaka said, Then please help me learn, O Brahmin, the value of seclusion, out of the compassion in your heart, so that I may gain genuine understanding through practice, whereby I can, right here, personally experience that peaceful state as I wander this world, fully detached, unobstructed, and unscathed, just like the boundless space itself. The Blessed One then said, I will instruct and teach you that peaceful state, Dhotaka, which is attained right here and now, and not through following some oral tradition or hearsay. And as you come to know and understand this yourself, and live according to it, mindfully wandering the world by not seizing and grabbing, you shall indeed cross over and go beyond this conditioned world. The Brahmin Dhotaka then said, My heart is now overjoyed in seeing that I too will experience that peaceful state by following the wise sage's noble Dhamma and living according to it. I mindfully shall go about in the world, not seizing or grabbing. Thereby I will cross over and go beyond this conditioned world. The Blessed One then said, Dhotaka, one must come to understand directly and as it truly is, that whatever you know and experience in life, whether above, below, across, all around, and everything in between, are simply snares meant to trap you. Therefore, do not crave for either this or any other world, and thus release yourself from further re-becoming. Sutta Nipāta 5.7 Upasīvamāṇavapucchā Sutta. Questions of the Brahmin Upasīva. Then the Brahmin Upasīva said, O Sakyan, I find myself utterly alone in my despair, stuck without any support, as I struggle to cross over and beyond the great flood. O guide with pure vision, please give me an object of meditation, with which I may finally be able to cross over this great flood. And the Blessed One said, Carefully stay present, as you mindfully look straight at nothingness in the mind, depending on which you will safely be crossing the flood. Abandoning all sense stimulation, while maintaining noble silence within, by cutting off all conversations to an absolute minimum, always stand guard, day and night, patiently keeping watch for the destruction of craving to take place. And the Brahmin Upasīva said, The one freed from passion towards all kinds of sensual pleasures, and left with nothingness as his only support, having abandoned and left behind every other state of being, along with everything else, who now looks at the release from perception as his ultimate liberation. Would such a person continue to live, but no longer be subject to wandering in samsara? And the Blessed One replied, The one freed from passion towards all kinds of sensual pleasures, and left with nothingness as his only support, Upasīva, such a person having already abandoned and left behind every other state of being, along with everything else, who now looks at the release from perception as his ultimate liberation, would continue to live, but no longer be subject to wandering in samsara. The Brahmin Upasīva then said, "O all-seeing one, if he were to continue living but without being susceptible to samsara any more, then could his lifespan be extended to a vast number of years, during which time, when he attains final nibbana, would his consciousness then simply disappear and vanish?" Then the Blessed One answered, "Upasīva, just like when fire is blown out by the wind, no one could know as to what could be identified as a flame any more. Likewise the sage, once released from the nama group, he goes out of recognition once and for all, and could no longer be identified as a sage." Then the Brahmin Upasīva said, "By having gone out of recognition, does that mean he no longer exists, though? Or does he remain untouched, and thus continues living forever? May the great sage please explain this to me, as he has known and understood it himself directly." And the Blessed One said, "Once he has gone out, Upasīva, he can neither be defined nor reckoned, and whatever means of measuring those around him might have used previously in describing him, all those become obsolete once he is awakened. For all modes of description that are familiar to people no longer apply to him any more. This because when all conditioned phenomena are totally removed from oneself, then all means of speaking about him are also eradicated." Sutta Nipāta 5.8 Nandamāṇavapucchā Sutta. Questions of the Brahmin Nanda. Then the Brahmin Nanda addressed the Blessed One by saying, "People call this or that person a holy man or a sage in the world. But I would like to know on what basis it is truly so, that the person in question may truly be a holy person or a sage. Is it the accumulation of knowledge that makes one a sage? Or is it actually because of the manner in which one lives one's life?" The Blessed One replied, "Nanda, it is not through learning or adherence to a particular viewpoint or tradition that has been passed on, or hearsay, or the accumulation of knowledge that makes one a sage in the world. However, it is the one who lives wandering without the need to socialize, nor seeking companionship here or there, whom I declare a true sage, the one who dwells unconfused, without any expectations, wishes, or desires left in his heart." Then the Brahmin Nanda said, "O Blessed One, there are and have been in the past countless recluses and Brahmins who declare that purity is achieved through whatever it is they see or hear, through following this or that tradition, or by means of living with mere virtuous conduct, or this many rules, or the performance of rites, rituals, and chanting and various other ways. But I ask you, O speaker of truth, have such people truly attained to purity? Have they really crossed over to the farther shore and overcome birth and aging?" And the Blessed One replied, "Those countless recluses and Brahmins who declare that purity is achieved through whatever it is they see or hear, through following this or that tradition, or by means of living with mere virtuous conduct, or this many rules, or the performance of rites, rituals, and chanting in various other ways, despite the length of time whereby they dedicate themselves to engage in all those practices they claim as modes for attaining to purity, such people have not attained to purity at all, nor, therefore, crossed over to the farther shore, nor overcome birth and aging at all. This I declare. Then the Brahmin Nanda inquired further, if, despite the length of time spent by those recluses and Brahmins, who declare that purity is achieved through whatever it is they see or hear, through following this or that tradition, or by means of living with mere virtuous conduct, or this many rules, or the performance of rites, rituals, and chanting, and various other ways, as I am now understanding from the Blessed One's declaration, contrary to their claims, those people have not, in fact, attained to purity at all, nor therefore crossed over to the farther shore and overcome birth and aging. Then who, may I ask, has indeed crossed over, sir? Please help me understand this, O Blessed One. And the Blessed One replied, Nanda, I do not say that all recluses and Brahmins are shrouded and thus inescapably stuck in birth and aging. There are those, however, who have given up whatever it is they see or hear, having abandoned views and the following of this or that tradition, or the belief that purity comes as a natural outcome of living with mere virtuous conduct, or by adhering to this many rules, or the performance of rites, rituals, and chanting, and various other ways. It is they who, through understanding and then giving up of craving entirely, have now freed themselves from the asavas, the contaminants of the heart. They indeed are the flood-crossing men, I declare. And the Brahmin Nanda added, My heart is brimful with joy in having heard the life-giving instructions from the Blessed One himself. The great sage, Gautama, has meticulously and exquisitely explained to me what it means to be living with purity without any assets or acquisitions. Those who have given up whatever they see or hear, abandoned views and the following of this or that tradition, or the belief that purity comes as a natural outcome of living with mere virtuous conduct, or by adhering to this many rules, or the performance of rites, rituals, and chanting, and various other ways, and who, through understanding and then giving up of craving entirely, have now freed themselves from the asavas, the contaminants of the heart. I also call such noble beings the real flood-crossing men. Sutta Nipāta 5.9 Hemakamāṇavapucchā Sutta. Questions of the Brahmin Hemaka. Then the Brahmin Hemaka said, Before I came to the dispensation of Gautama, what I was taught by other teachers pertained to, if it's been like this, then it will be like that. But I saw how their teachings were all based on hearsay, which only increased my confusion. Never finding any delight in such things, I was hopelessly miserable, until I came to you, O sage. You gave me the teaching on how to destroy craving. I am now certain that this will help me to overcome all the attachments for the world, as I abide mindfully aware throughout my life. The Blessed One then said, Hemaka, whether through seeing, hearing, sensing, or perceiving, when you drop the fervent desire and passion to experience all that is pleasant and enjoyable, at that very moment you will attain the deathless state, that is, Nibbana. Those who know and understand this, abiding ever mindfully, are here and now fully released. Always at peace, they have overcome all the attachments for the world and are forever appeased. Sutta Nipāta 5.10 Todeyyamāṇavapucchā Sutta. Questions of the Brahmin, Todeyya. When no sensual desires arise in the heart, asked the Brahmin, Todeyya, someone in whom there is no craving to be found, that person who has crossed beyond all doubts and speculations, what is the nature of their release? What is their liberation like? And the Blessed One replied, that's it. That itself is the nature of their release, their liberation, and no other. Namely, when no sensual desires arise in their heart, in whom there is no craving to be found, that person who has crossed beyond all doubts and speculations. Then the Brahmin, Todeyya, said, and would such a person still have any hopes or aspirations left in him? Would they have, at this stage, reached the pinnacle of true understanding and wisdom? Or would they still need to do more work in cultivating wisdom? Please explain these things to me, O all-seeing one of the Sakyans. The Blessed One then replied, he has no more hopes or aspirations left in him, because at that stage he would have indeed reached the pinnacle of true understanding and wisdom, and truly no longer in need to do more work in cultivating wisdom. That is how you recognize a true stage, Todeyya, witnessing how they possess nothing and with no sensual desires to pursue, for they are attached to nothing in existence. Sutta Nipāta 5.11. Kappamāṇavapucchā Sutta. Questions of the Brahmin, Kappa. The Brahmin, Kappa, spoke these words. Bhante, for the one standing in the middle, great fear arises from the floods. Standing here, overcome by aging and death, please show me an island of refuge, where none of these two could ever happen to me again. And the Blessed One answered, Kappa, I will show you an island of refuge to overcome aging and death. For the one standing in the middle truly faces great fears arising from the floods. Neither having anything, nor seizing or grabbing onto anything, that is the only island, and no other. This I call Nibbana, which will bring you the complete end to aging and death, once and for all. The ones who understand this deeply and are mindful become cooled right here in this very birth. Thus, they are neither susceptible to Mara's tricks nor become pawns at the hands of the evil one. Sutta Nipāta 5.12. Jatukaṇṇimāṇavapucchā Sutta. Questions of the Brahmin, Jatukaṇṇi. Then the Brahmin Jatukaṇṇi approached and asked the Blessed One, O all-seeing sage, having heard about the hero who has uprooted from his heart the passion for sensuality, I now come asking the Blessed One, who has gone beyond the flood, if he could please describe to me the true state of peace. For having transcended sense pleasures, the Blessed One conducts himself much like the resplendent sun. While remaining untouched, it shines with its brilliance onto the earth, exposing all the dark spots on it. Kindly teach me the Dhamma, O great teacher, I who have little wisdom, so that I may understand the way to get rid of aging and death. And the Blessed One said, discipline yourself by getting rid of greed for sense pleasures, Jatukaṇṇi, and by renouncing and giving it all up, you will experience the true meaning of security. Thus, you will stop from running towards this and away from that. Let whatever came before just dry up and wither away, but don't replace it with something else. By keeping or grasping nothing, you will attend only to the middle, and in just this way you will live at peace and fully appeased. And when the Brahmin lives thus, free from greed and wanting towards all things belonging to the realm of name and form, he will then most certainly remove all the contaminants from his heart and be forever released from the grip of death. Sutta Nipāta 5.13 Badrāvudhamāṇavapucchā Sutta. Questions of the Brahmin Badrāvudha. I have come to ask the wise one, who gave up the security of the household life, the one who severed and cut off craving completely, said the Brahmin Badrāvudha, as he continued. O emancipated one, you who have crossed the floods, leaving all manner of delight-seeking behind, once having listened to the great Naga's words, all walk away with their minds gladdened with humility. O hero, so many people have come together from various districts, longing to hear you speak. Please, I ask that you teach us the Dhamma, which you know through and through. And the Blessed One said, Badrāvudha, whether above, below, across, or anywhere in between, whatever is identified with and held on to makes one take the bait of Mara, who right then and there has you by the hook. But by knowing and understanding this truth, the mindful bhikkhu continues giving up, never identifying with nor grabbing onto anything in the world, unlike the many who are attached to taking up and seizing, which only keeps them stuck in the domain of death. Sutta Nipāta 5.14 Udayamāṇavapucchā Sutta. Questions of the Brahmin Udaya. The Brahmin Udaya said, O resplendent meditator, seated as you are, stainless with all contaminants of the heart destroyed, as he continued, you who have completed the task, done what should be done, having gone through all phenomena by crossing beyond to the farther shore, I have come to you with the desire to make this request. Please, help me understand the nature of release, by way of directly knowing that obliterates ignorance. And the Blessed One instructed by saying, Give up entirely your impassioned attitude towards sensual pleasures, as well as towards painful and distressing situations. Throw out drowsiness and cultivate wise restraint, so to eliminate all regrets. And as you work on purifying the practice with mindfulness and equanimity, continue applying wholesome examination of the various states you encounter. This way, I declare, you will come to personally taste release, by way of directly knowing that obliterates ignorance. The Brahmin Udaya then said, What is the relationship between the world and the fetters? How can one identify them for what they truly are? And by abandoning what exactly can one finally experience Nibbana? The Blessed One replied, Seeking enjoyment is the fetter of the world. Thinking and pondering about things leads to identifying, but it is through the abandoning of craving that one can finally experience Nibbana. This is what I declare. The Brahmin Udaya then said, behaving mindfully, in which manner could consciousness come to cease without a trace? We come to listen to the Blessed One's instruction on this. Kindly speak to us the words that will clarify this for us. And the Blessed One replied, no longer looking for satisfaction in feelings, be they internally or externally generated. When one behaves mindfully in this manner, then consciousness comes to cease without a trace. Sutta Nipāta 5.15 Pārāyana Sutta. Questions of the Brahmin Pārāyana. Then the Brahmin Pārāyana said, O imperturbable revealer, you who are the unfailing knower of past births, with all doubts destroyed, I have come to find out the answer to my question from the one who has gone beyond all things. My question is about those for whom all forms of perception have disappeared into nothingness, the ones who have given up the whole body. Having reached the state where nothing is left, whether internally or externally, I ask the Sakyan sage what his instruction might be, so I may no longer remain stuck, and instead advance further in my practice. And the Blessed One said, O Pārāyana, the Tathagata, having directly known and experienced all the stations of consciousness, recognizes the person who is stuck, the one who is fully liberated, and the one who is on the path to be released. Knowing and understanding full well that delighting in the experience of the realm of nothingness is but a shackle and a fetter that leads to further rebirth, this itself is the necessary insight which allows the Brahmin to push through and truly live the perfect life. Sutta Nipāta 5.16 Ajitamāṇavapucchā Sutta. Questions of the Brahmin Mogaraja. O Blessed One, said the Brahmin Mogaraja, I have twice asked a question, but no answer was given by the Sakyan who possesses the pure vision. I am now here again, because I have heard that if one asked the same question yet a third time, the divine seer would go ahead and answer it. I have come to know the teachings of Gautama, the prominent Sakyan, and learn from him about this world, the next world, about the world of Brahma, and the world of Devas. Therefore, I am here to ask the one with the most excellent vision on what the best way is to look upon the world and live one's life, so that the king of death would be unable to see him. And the Blessed One replied, Mogaraja, when you live mindfully and look upon the world as empty, you will be able to uproot from your heart the wrong view of a substantial or an independent self. That is how you should look upon the world. For when you train and live in this way, the king of death will neither be able to reach you nor even see you. Sutta Nipāta 5.17 Puṇṇakamāṇavapucchā Sutta. Questions of the Brahmin Pingya. I am now old, all wrinkly and weak, having lost my vigor and youth with discolored skin. The Brahmin Pingya said, I can barely see now, in addition to losing my hearing day by day. Please help me, teacher, because I do not want to die like this, all lost and confused. Explain to me the Dhamma, so that I may finally understand birth and death while still alive, and thus finally rid myself from both. The Blessed One replied, witnessing how negligent people, infatuated by all things that have form, sooner or later, due to their heedlessness, become tormented and overwhelmed by the very forms they were smitten by. Therefore, Pingiya, be diligent and just drop this reliance on matter altogether, so you never come back to this vicious cycle of birth and death ever again. And the Brahmin Pingiya then said, Nothing can lie hidden from your vision throughout the four quarters, the sections in between, and whether above or below. There is nothing in any of these directions of the world which has not been seen, heard, sensed, or cognized by you. Please show me the way, so that I can free myself from rebirth and from getting old. The Blessed One said, Pingiya, look around at those who, due to their heedlessness, continue to be tormented and overwhelmed by the very forms they were smitten by, as a result of which they blindly fall victim to old age and anguish. So, Pingiya, be diligent and just drop craving altogether and end rebirth once and for all. Sutta Nipāta 5.18 Pārāyana Vatthugāthā Sutta. Homage to the path that takes one to the beyond. The Blessed One taught this while staying at the Puṇṇaka shrine in Magadha, where the following 16 Brahmins had come to posit their questions, and where the great teacher explained them all, one after another. The explanations that the Lord Buddha provided, even to a single question, is enough, whereby once you understand the meaning and significance of the Dhamma presented in it and put it into practice, you can certainly come to end aging and death by going to the farther shore. For this reason, the teachings found here are for crossing over and reaching to the other shore, which is why this exposition of the Dhamma is called the path that takes one to the beyond. Ajita, Tissametteyya, Puṇṇaka, and Mettagū, Dhotaka, Upasīva, Nanda, and afterwards Hemaka, with both Todeyya and Kappa, Jatukaṇṇi, the wise one, the Brahmins, Badrāvudha, Udaya, Posala, the wise, Mogaraja, and the great sage Pingiya. All these sages approached the Buddha, coming one by one to the great seer, who possesses flawlessly good conduct, as they obtained clarifying answers to their deeply subtle questions from the most brilliant Buddha himself. The Blessed One then proceeded to answer all their questions one by one, delighting the satisfied Brahmin sages with his clarifying explanations that were entirely based on truth. Being utterly pleased by the answers received from the kinsman of the sun, the wise one with pure vision, they all, then and there, one by one, went forth in the Blessed One's presence and practiced by living the true holy life in his dispensation. If anyone were to dedicate oneself by applying the explanations given by the Blessed One, even a single one of these questions would suffice in taking that person beyond to the farther shore, to the ultimate security. Thus, practicing this holy life completely guarantees that you will most certainly go from this shore to the one beyond. And this should be the result of your genuine dedication to this supreme path, which is why this exposition of the Dhamma is called the path that takes one to the beyond. Sutta Nipāta 5.19 Pārāyana Sutta. Persevering on the path and going to the beyond. Then the Brahmin Pingiya exclaimed, I am chanting and reciting, but this time I do so in honor of the going to the beyond, to the farther shore, as taught to us by the wise and flawless sage with endless wisdom. He, after all, taught us the Dhamma as it is, which he himself has directly known and seen. Being free from sensuality, desireless, and fully released from all the knots, for he is the Naga, and he has no reasons to be speaking falsely. Come now, let us praise with our beautifully weaved utterances the pure and spotless teacher, who is without blemish, having left all sorrow and delusion behind, along with pretending, hypocrisy, and conceit in all their aspects. The all-seeing Buddha, the destroyer of darkness, has overcome all and gone to the end of the world, far beyond all becoming. Now liberated from the asavas which contaminate the heart, he is desireless and lives having eliminated all manner of suffering. Truly, it is the Supreme Brahmin that I venerate. Like a bird leaving its small nest, finding itself in a forest full of fruit trees in abundance, so too I find myself giving up my narrow views from the past, as I encounter the wide open spaces of freedom, where I am able to taste the expansiveness of the Dhamma, just like the swan stretching out its wings, having found the endlessly wide lake where it can finally be free. When, in the past, they would speak to me about the dispensation of the recluse Gautama, I would reply by saying, all that simply pertains to one's future birth, and not to their life here and now, or that what he's teaching is mere hearsay, speculation, or the product of sheer logic and nothing more. But, behold, see how the conqueror of death sits there unshakably, the Lord of the Dhamma himself, alone and untouched by anything, yet much like the sun, he continues radiating his light brilliantly to everyone around him. Such, after all, is the wisdom of Gautama, spreading wide and vast as the earth. He is the teacher who finally taught me the Dhamma that is tangible, visible, timeless, and immediately effective, right here, right now. For it brings well-being and genuine safety from all mental anguish and pain, putting an end to all craving once and for all. There can be no comparison to the relief this brings to the heart. So how could I, Pingya, and why would I ever want to live far from him, even for a moment, away from my teacher, Gautama of great wisdom, Gautama of limitless wisdom? He is, after all, the one teacher who finally taught me the Dhamma that is tangible, visible, timeless, and immediately effective, right here, right now. For it brings well-being and genuine safety from all mental anguish and pain, putting an end to all craving once and for all. There can be no comparison to the relief this brings to the heart. So, no, Brahmin, I could never be able to live far from him, not even for a moment, away from Gautama of great wisdom, my teacher, Gautama of limitless wisdom. He is the only one who taught me the true Dhamma, the Dhamma that is tangible, visible, timeless, and immediately effective, right here, right now, for it brings well-being and genuine safety from all mental anguish and pain, putting an end to all craving once and for all. There can be no comparison to the relief this brings to the heart. Through my diligence, I see him wherever I am, Brahmin, with my mind's eye, day and night. I spend the night paying homage to him, my teacher, even when others are fast asleep. So you see, he is always near me, and I am always near him. My faith and confidence in him, as well as the joy and consistent mindfulness, never deviate from the dispensation of Gautama, which palpitates in my heart. Therefore, in whichever direction the wise one happens to be, there I point my head as I bow at his feet. Being old and weak, although my broken body is not able to carry me to him, to pay my respect and veneration at his feet, yet I am always next to him, as I constantly go to him with my mind. For you see, O Brahmin, my mind and thoughts are now constantly tied to him. Immersed and floundering in the mud, I kept jumping from one island to the next, seeking safety. But then I saw the fully self-awakened Buddha, the flood crosser himself, in the flesh, freed and fully liberated from all the asavas. As Vakkali, Badrāvudha and Gautama of Alavi were released and fully liberated through their faith, so should you, Pingya, commit yourself fully to having confidence in the Dhamma of Gautama, your teacher. And soon, Pingya, you will also attain freedom and go to the farther shore, crossing beyond the reach of the domains of death. Every time I hear the great sage's words, the confidence in my heart grows and becomes exceedingly bright. The awakened one has revealed the truth by pulling away the veil of deceit, teaching me with his kind and loving manner and with softness, when all the while pulling the arrow out from my heart. By knowing directly and seeing the most sublime among the devas, he knows and understands all things, whether high or low. All questions have been answered, and all doubts removed, while the hearts of genuine students, eager to learn, finally find their island of rest. Unwavering is my path, for I go to the unshakable, the likeness of which can be found nowhere. With no doubts left in my heart, you should now know me as one whose mind is made up, for I will persevere on my path as I go to the beyond. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Here ends the set of discourses found within the Sutta Nipāta. May it be helpful to you in your progress as you persevere in this path of practice, as you train yourselves until you reach final Nibbana. Sukhi hotu.